That's really one of the best tricks we know to tell you is when the Sculpey isn't baked, you can take some 91% rubbing alcohol and it'll affect it and it'll clean it up, tighten it up, just like water would to terracotta.
With a paintbrush.
With the paintbrush or your fingers. Just your fingers will sit there and smooth it out. And then after it's baked, the petroleum jelly. Those two chemical tricks is really what a lot of our process comes down to.
Yeah. So, this stuff, you bake it in a home oven. I don't know how familiar you are with it. You bake it in a home oven at a low temperature. Not the temperature on the box, which might be like 300.
275.
Right, that's for jewelry and stuff, we think. But that's too high for us. We like to do it more like 200 or 220 for a pretty long time, 2 hours, let's say. And when we get through baking, this is another key piece of advice. Turn off the oven after 2 hours and let it sit. Don't even poke at it to see if it's hard, because that's when it's really curing, and you'll cause real problems cracking with the piece cracking down the road if you mess with it when it's cured.
Because there's a lot of heat and moisture. So you could touch the outside and it might feel cool, but there's still heat and moisture. The crystals are settling on the inside. So you want to leave it alone for like 4, 5, 6 hours. Let it become totally room temperature. Is that what you just said?
Yes, basically.
In the oven?
Exactly, yes. And if you can like turn it off and leave it overnight, that's great. And then when it's room temperature, pull it out. If a piece gets bulky in the middle, you only want Super Sculpey to get about a 1/2 inch thick or 3/4 the most, because that is another thing that leads to a lot of cracking, is applying it like this thick. So spots that get real bulky, sometimes we use aluminum foil. And so you would crunch it around the aluminum wire, and that one thing is cheaper because it's not Super Sculpey, which costs, but mainly it's lighter. And so this really helps with the weight. The piece wants to sag and crack, and you have all these cracking issues. So if you can bulk out the big parts with aluminum foil, that's going to save you a lot of hassle down the road. So when Jared and I, about the rubbing alcohol, that's something you generally want to save as almost the last step, because once you apply the rubbing alcohol to the soft Super Sculpey, it cleans up fingerprints and stuff, and you're doing it with a watercolor paintbrush. But it makes it tacky and a little bit harder to work after that.
Definitely.
So you don't want to, be halfway through and be doing the rubbing alcohol. You really want to save that until you're about to bake it.
Also, you want to use a brand new paintbrush when you're doing the rubbing alcohol, because if there's any paint whatsoever in the brush, the rubbing alcohol will start soaking it out, and you'll start painting your sculpture, whatever color that is.
And from experience.
Definitely.
If you're going to cast it, I don't know how much you know about casting. Jared and I don't cast our own stuff. We finish the sculpture and we send it off to badass casters, mold makers and casters. That's an art in and of itself. It takes a lot of time. There are people who are really good at it, and we don't want to spend all our time doing that. But these pieces, a lot of times, they need to be cut up to be cast. And talk about that a little, Jared. You want to cut off. Usually, it's the limbs.
In the old days, there was all kinds of rules because people didn't have the rotocasters, and so you couldn't do something that was at more of like a 45-degree angle because you couldn't get the resin to pour.
Yeah, they would pour it upside down, so where it wouldn't flow back up.
Exactly. You could create keys and sprues and stuff, but it was still difficult. But now with the rotocasters, everything spins, the resin gets into everything. And hey, let me call you right back. All right, little brother, sorry about that. But if we're gonna, like something like this, as soon as this arm starts coming off here, or if it was really coming out here and holding an axe, say the worst case scenario, you would definitely want to cut it off, because in shipping it would break, and for casting purposes it would be difficult.
And that's Jared does that even on my pieces. He cuts them up because it's a bit of a brutal thing. But it's something a lot of times it's a jeweler's saw, and you get in there with the wire clippers, and it's brutal for me because the piece, you know, is far along usually, or it's almost finished. But you just have to have the attitude of it's all fixable. You know, I'm going to destroy a certain amount of millimeter or two, but I'm going to fix it. You know,
it's important to resculpt that blade width that you're taking out, and
then we key these pieces. The arm would have a male-female thing, so it would go in, and it's really good to make them square. If you make them round, then someone can put the arm in at whatever angle they want to.
Right.
If you make it square, it's more obvious. Here's how I want the arm to be. It fits like that.
But also, when you're cutting them up, I always describe it as a mental process. If you make it completely finished and then you think, okay, now I'm going to cut it up, you feel like you're harming it. It's better to think, you know, cutting it up is part of the process. I've got it finished-ish, but now I understand it. It's not at 100%. It's only at 75% because I've still got to cut it up and I've still got to repair the damaged or whatever's happened when you're cutting it up. Sometimes we'll do the keys and stuff as we're going. Each piece is a little bit different. But yeah, like you're saying with the rectangles, it's even better if you, with the squares, it's even better if you can make it a rectangle because then you only have two choices of which way it could possibly go.
Right, right. You know, it goes without saying that for what we do, anatomy is a huge thing. And a knowledge of anatomy, it's something you really can't fake because people can see it's wrong even from 30 feet away when they're walking by in a show or something. People just have a sense of what the human body looks like. You need to understand musculature. You need to understand what's going on under the skin with the muscles of how they work and how they connect and interact.
Yeah, reference is everything. We cut up a lot of muscle magazines, and like if a guy's in this pose, we would look for guys in similar poses.
Right.
And
you might get if let's say the character's doing this, you might find one picture with an arm like this, and another picture with an arm like this, another picture where the guy's head's turned how you want it, and because as I say, this stuff it's very difficult to fake that stuff, and it's the same thing with creatures. Even if it's a creature no one's ever seen. It's
good to have it
being based in something, you know, looking like something that could be biological, you know. That's one of like Wayne Barlow's geniuses, you know, the concept designer. You look at it and you're like, okay, this could be alive. I can see this being alive. And so anatomy is a huge thing. When we were growing up, you know, designing the pieces, overall look, it's like Steve Root, a famous comic book artist, does thumbnails of his covers, okay? And they're like an inch tall. They're literally like this small. And his point is, if it doesn't work here, it's not going to work when you see the actual comic book cover, the composition, right? And there's something very similar about that with sculpting, and it's people need to get up and get a far distance away and look back at the piece.
That's good.
From 40 feet away, where it's small, because you work so close up and you start to lose sight of the whole thing.
The profile and what it's.
So yeah, I equate that to if you get 30 or 40 feet away from it and look at it and it's much smaller. If it works there, it's going to work. You know what I mean? If it doesn't work, it's not going to work.
Another great trick is to put pieces in the mirror and look at them because you can find all kinds of faults.
Yeah, it's sort of
asymmetricalness.
It's sort of horrifying the first time you do that.
It can be difficult.
It's going to freak you out. A face will look perfectly right, and you put it in a mirror and you realize that it's not. It's bizarre. But it's a good trick to get things symmetrical because it will show you what's not symmetrical.
Questions, maybe?
I wanted to say, you know, when we were coming up, what really influenced us as far as design and concept were comic books and fantasy stuff. Frank Frazetta. Drawing comics the Marvel way. That book was really influential to us and talked about posing, things that we still use to this day.